This is the one concept that really helped me get to financial freedom faster and make it seem easier. It is simply buy yourself 1 month of freedom at a time. In 2016, I began saving up for an experiment living as a digital nomad. It was the first time I had to seriously think about what my runway would look like. How long would my money last if I were to have no income coming in and I wanted to continue traveling? I decided to do a small experiment, figuring that 2 months abroad would be enough to gauge what this digital nomad life was about. I calculated my monthly expenses, rent, food, all the big items, and created a travel fund worth at least 2 months of expenses. This shocked me coming back from the trip. I had a little bit more money left over than I had anticipated. And so I got a taste of buying myself months of freedom into the future, and I wasn't going back. The typical financial advice rests on two extremes. On one extreme, you have the Dave Ramsey types who tells you to have an emergency fund. For example, a starter fund of $1,000. On the other hand, you have retirement planning, where you often get figures well into the millions. Fidelity Investments recommends that a 40-year-old should have a nest egg twice her annual income. By age 50, the egg should be 4 times income. Now, this super long-term outlook is hard to relate to for younger people starting out in the workforce, saddled with student loan debt and without much savings. There needs to be an aspirational stage. 21% of Americans don't save any of their annual income. On the contrary, 4 in 10 excel at putting money aside for a specific purpose, like a trip or wedding, but aren't consistent setting aside money for the future. Taking in these insights, we can apply the psychological trick of chunking, which is simplifying things like financial freedom by breaking them down into smaller, digestible pieces. Here's what I found way more motivating: buying myself 1 month of freedom at a time. Here's a rough way to calculate. First, figure out your monthly expenses. I typically use the last 12 months average. I pad that number by 10 to 20% just to capture any swings in my spending. Every time you save that number, you've bought your future self a free month. Let's mull over that last point. Every time you save a month's worth of expenses, you've bought your future self a month of freedom. So say that your average living expenses is $3,000. To pad that a little bit, be generous, get a wide margin of error, we pad it by 20%. So 3,000 times 1.2 is $3,600. Now, every time you save $3,600, you just bought your future self 1 month of freedom. Now let's extend out this idea. What would it take for you to buy yourself 1 year of freedom? Using that previous illustration of $3,000 a month, that looked like 3K times 1.2 times 12 for 12 months. And that come out to be about $43,000. So for about the cost of a new car, you can buy yourself 1 year of freedom. Once you reach that, you could decide to take time off from work, start a business, try being a nomad, or explore a career change. Now, obviously, it could be difficult to save that much money, but generally, the more money that you make, the more that you could save, especially if you don't allow your lifestyle to inflate too much. Now, this type of illustration helps you model out some important things, like what do you do when you get a bonus or a raise? Now, you might be thinking, isn't this just an emergency fund? Backup plans are important, but doesn't create aliveness. The future self-savings method is a lot more actionable than I want to be rich someday, or I want to be a millionaire, something really broad and amorphous. Imagine that for every month you work, you also earn a free month into the future. If you get really aggressive, imagine for every month that you work, you earn 2 months off in the future. Buying myself future months of freedom had the subtle effect of reorienting my relationship to money. Before, I was just thinking, how much do I want to save? But after, it was more like, how much freedom do I want to buy myself? How much time do I want to make? This is the cornerstone of my financial freedom. By the age of 30, I realized that I had more than 10 years accounted for. Obviously, a lot of that's invested and I want that money to ride. But it gave me a lot of confidence thinking that, like, knock on wood, if anything happens, I'm good for the next decade. And there's a peace of mind that that financial freedom has bought me. And I hope that this idea of buying yourself 1 month of freedom at a time is motivating and helpful. I'm Oz Chen, and I help you mind your money.